Let me thank real quickly some of the people from our shop who've been involved in this. Anna Ovid, where's Anna? She's been just spectacular. Thank you very much. Elliot Gerson, my colleague, who's the Vice President of the Aspen Institute in charge of all international and public programs, has really been in charge of this. Mickey Bergman has done great work, and I see Tariq Riz back there and many others from, I think. But most of all, I want to thank Tony Verstandig, who runs all the Middle East programs of the Aspen Institute, has been a mentor of mine, tells me everything I need to know about not only the Middle East and not only the world, but my life in general. And so I'm happy to turn it over to Tony to introduce this panel.
Thank you very much, Walter, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's my honor to introduce David Rothkopf in the next panel, The Next Frontier of Innovation, What are the Big Ideas? David is a friend and colleague and will be our moderator for this panel discussion. He currently is president and CEO of Garten Rothkopf, an international advisory firm specializing in transformational global trends, notably those associated with energy security and emerging markets, and probably just about everything else. David and I were fortunate enough to work together in the Clinton administration. He's also well published and, among other things, is a frequent guest at the Aspen Institute. So it's with a great honor and privilege to welcome David to moderate this next panel. David?
Thanks very much, Walter and Tony both, and it's a pleasure to be here with everybody this morning. A little closer than I thought, I guess, with the microphone, but we'll work that out as we go forward. We were off to a great start in the morning session, and I think laid a foundation, thanks to Vijay's excellent guidance of the panel, of some of the core issues associated with innovation. What our hope is here is to get a little bit more practical, to focus on specific ideas, to focus on the obstacles associated with those ideas, and to look forward a little bit, because innovation implies that we continuously look forward. We've got a terrific panel here of exceptionally well-qualified and distinguished individuals. I'll introduce them in the order that they're in the program here. John Hagel is co-chairman of the Deloitte Center for the Edge. Dr. K.R. Sridhar is the CEO of Bloom Energy. His Excellency Sultan Al-Jaber is the CEO of Masdar. Ibrahim Ajami is the Chief Executive Officer of the Advanced Technology Investment Corporation. And Jassem Al-Zaabi is the Executive Director of the Information, Communications, and Technology component of Mubadala. So we cover a range of sectors here, and I think that's one of the things that'll make the discussion interesting. And as in the preceding discussion, what we'll do is we'll begin with a couple of rounds of questions for the group, but as soon as any of you feel compelled to join in, because hopefully this will be conversational. I come at this from a perspective that I guess is associated with coming from New York City, another person from New York, although affiliated with a different university in New York City. The one that was there for 200 years, which is why New York's a great city. But in any event, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I was hoping he was here for that comment. But in any event, the natural reaction when you're at a conference on innovation, if you're from New York City, is to become an innovation skeptic. And I'm not skeptical of innovation, of course, but I'm skeptical of formulas. And even in the course of the first panel, we've heard different formulas for innovation. And of course, I think as anybody who's grappled with the issue knows, there is no formula. We've heard about state innovation. We've heard the implications on the Silicon Valley side of what you might call garage innovation. We've heard about kind of systematic innovation, which is what happened in Korea and in Japan. But we also talk a little bit about the context of what you might call lightning bolt innovation, inspiration, the thing that comes when you get bright people and you put them together in the right kind of environment. And all of those things work. We've talked about different models. There's a Korean model, a Japanese model, there's a Singapore model, a Norwegian model, an Irish model. We've got a Chinese model, which is a very complicated model because it comes with a lot of size and money associated with it, and it's obviously going to be very different from a model pursued in a place such as the UAE here. And innovation in all of those contexts changes, but it also changes when you go sector to sector. What I hope we'll do by looking at some of the challenges associated with those sectors is find some cross-cutting themes and gain some insights. So let me start in the middle here, and I'll just bounce around the panel. And although I don't really know any of you gentlemen, I'm going to pick up on Vijay's informality because I think it leads to a discussion. I hope you don't mind if I call you by your first names. Or in this case, I will turn to KR, who doesn't even have a first name. He only has first initials. And let me ask you, KR, as you at Bloom Energy are grappling with the next big thing, what is it, and what are the specific challenges associated with innovation that are tied to it?
I think, first and foremost, to our hosts, thank you for your hospitality and graciousness. Happy to be here. To answer your question, David, to think differently starts, I guess, with my name. So I'm happy to have a name that sort of says something different about me. And that's at the core of innovation, to be able to look at things differently than what they are. And all of us are used to walking around little kids and asking, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And I always wondered about that question. And it turns out that we're hoping that they'll give us a good answer from which we can figure out what we should be doing with our lives. So it wasn't much different of what happened with my two kids that Ambassador Taiba and like Walter and Tony know. I have a 12-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter who were talking the night before I left from San Francisco about my trip. And they both went to Shanghai and saw the World Expo, in which the UAE pavilion was phenomenal. Why was it phenomenal? It was a story about a grandfather talking about the pearls and what oil did to them. And it was absolutely motivational. It was breathtaking. So here they are at dinner, having seen that a couple months ago. And my son says, Dad, what are you going to talk about? And I said about alternative energy and why that's important. And my daughter, who's 7 years old, says, didn't we see that they had a lot of oil? Why should they be worrying about energy? Isn't it us that should be worrying about energy? And my son looks back at her and says, well, they don't want to be a one-trick pony. Okay? And after that, it got to what you would expect between a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old about a one-trick pony and what that meant and the whole thing going off in dimensions that you all don't need to hear. But it sort of synthesizes and captures what we're trying to do out here. It's when you have opportunity, it's when you have strength of framing this country as, if you're an energy leader today, do you want to be an energy leader tomorrow, as opposed to do you want to be the oil leader for as long as oil exists? And I think that's the right frame, and I give tremendous credit to your leadership here for thinking about it the right way and framing about it the right way. Why is energy important? Think of the markets that you would want to go about innovating if you want to innovate. There's innovation for innovation's sake, and there's some real innovation that can make a difference in people's lives. The market needs to be disruptive, which means very high levels of inefficiency is built into it. We all know that that's the case for energy. The second thing you look at is a very large market where the supply and demand are completely out of sync. The 2 billion people coming out of poverty, the 2 billion people that are yet to be born needing the energy, the supply-demand mismatch that exists today creates that perfect opportunity. And then, more importantly, energy is an enabling technology. Just like IT was not for computer geeks, it just turned everybody's lives. Energy is an enabling technology. So you put all that together, and then you say, are there technologies and our technology knowledge at this point in time ripe enough to apply to capture this market? And the answer is yes, I would submit. So now you got the perfect storm. Forget the climate change for a minute, forget everything else for a minute. Just look at a market opportunity. You have the perfect storm. And then people ask, what about the size of the market? Everybody says $5 trillion market. I beg to disagree with you. The reason I beg to disagree with you is that's trying to size the market of computing before the personal computer came along. That's like trying to size the market of telecommunications before cell phones came along. This market is a lot larger because it's an enabling technology. Think of the problems that we have going forward. Water. What's the difference between dirty water and clean water? Affordable energy. Okay? When we're able to do that, this is one of the biggest markets. And why, as an energy leader, would you not want to be an energy leader in that market? That is the framing, that's the question. And the answer, at least to me, is very obvious. And I think it is obvious to you, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. So I just commend you on that. How do we think about it differently? And I'll leave it for greater discussion later, but I'll just put two topics. Alternating current versus direct current. Which way will we go in the future? Distributed generation versus centralized distribution, them coexisting together and figuring out how they need to work. That's an area. So there are multiple ripe areas for innovation within that whole sector that one needs to look at.
Okay, maybe we can come back to that because distributed generation is a good example because there's a lot of promise, and the place that it's drawn to the most tend to be the least developed areas. And so you've got new technologies going into places with no technologies.
That's right.
And that becomes a specific hurdle for a particular kind of innovation. And maybe we can look back at that. Ibrahim, perhaps you can speak of a specific area and some of the specific challenges that you're facing at the moment.
Well, I think I'd like to start by speaking about what ATIC is the guardian of for Abu Dhabi, and that's the semiconductor industry. The semiconductor industry, when we first decided to enter the semiconductor industry, everybody around the world thought we were crazy. What makes Abu Dhabi think they can succeed in the semiconductor industry when we all know that there are so many nations and companies that have failed? And we spent the morning talking about attitude and attracting talent and being ambitious and being global, all the elements that are absolutely critical for success in the semiconductor industry. We got into the semiconductor industry because it is a highly productive industry, the most productive industry in the world. We got into the semiconductor industry because it is extremely high growth and because of the intellectual intensity of that industry. With that comes some significant challenges. Number one, the capital requirements to operate in this industry are quite significant. It costs $6 to $7 billion every 3 years to build a manufacturing facility in the semiconductor industry. The talent requirements are very challenging. And last but not least is the extensive need for public-private partnerships to succeed in the semiconductor industry. So we thought about all this, and what we have put in place is an organization and a strategy that thinks about Abu Dhabi not as the semiconductor hub, but thinks about Abu Dhabi as a semiconductor hub within this global network. A network composed of Singapore, of Germany, of the United States, and one day what we hope will be Abu Dhabi. We thought extensively about talent. And one of the comments this morning that John made is how do you think about talent, not just within Abu Dhabi, but talent within a global framework, within a global context? Well, in Abu Dhabi, yes, we have to attract the right talent. Yes, we have to grow the right talent here locally. But to succeed and continue to innovate in the semiconductor industry, we have to think a lot broader and much more creative than that. The talent that will one day succeed in this industry in Abu Dhabi has to be a lot more global and has to fit within this global platform and asset base that we've created around the world. So, the industrial policymakers call our strategy in Abu Dhabi quite insane, because we are spending $15 billion outside of Abu Dhabi without $1 of GDP contribution inside of Abu Dhabi, in the hopes that one day all this will feed into this technology strategy in Abu Dhabi. Given the rate of change in this industry, given the competitive nature of this industry, given the global nature of this industry, and how innovation is such a key requirement, once again, Abu Dhabi stepped up and said, to succeed, we have to think a lot bigger than Abu Dhabi. We have to have the right attitude. We have to be a lot more ambitious. We have to think about talent broadly, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with our semiconductor strategy. The challenges are tremendous. In this industry, the things we speak about today are very different from what we spoke about 3 years ago. But again, we do it by tapping into our talent in North America, by tapping into our talent in Asia, by tapping into the talent in Europe, and one day we hope the talent in Abu Dhabi. That is how we think about innovation in the semiconductor industry and the role of Abu Dhabi in this innovation network.
Very, very interesting presentation. You know, my father is a scientist who teaches how people learn. And one of the things he talks about is embedded knowledge. And the example he always gives of embedded knowledge is the hammer. Because if you look at a hammer, you know which end to pick it up, even if you've never seen a hammer before. That's embedded knowledge. There's something lying inside that hammer. And you know, inside the presentation that we just heard from Ibrahim, there's a lot of embedded insight into how innovation works without being exactly broken down. So for example, you talk about capital as a challenge, but also you have capital here. So capital is an opportunity, it's a comparative advantage, it's a challenge for everybody else, but it's a tool for innovation. Here, you talk about hubs, and hubs are a way of rethinking the world, not in terms of countries, but in terms of economic centers that are around the world, whether it's Shanghai or Singapore or whatever, and the whole cluster concept around that. You talked about the willingness to embrace change in a region where not every country is willing to embrace change. Another comparative advantage, another kind of embedded view of innovation. And you also talked about some of this is going to happen outside the country. Now that's an innovation strategy, right? You have a national policy of promoting innovation, and to do it, you have to start in some cases outside your own borders. So I just think it's we if we're going to think about innovation and learn about it, we have to sort of pick these things up and sort of turn them around and look at what's going on inside them. Jassem, you are doing interesting things in the satellite space. Perhaps you have similar story or insights you can share.
Sure. I agree with my colleagues here and most of what have been said in terms of innovation and how we try to focus on innovation in this part of the world, and I will relate that to the satellite example you want me to talk about. But I think the dilemma sometimes we come across that innovation here is coming most of the time under semi-government or government entities, where we see in the US it's mainly coming from SMEs and private sector. There is a hybrid model happening also in Far East, and I think we talked about it this morning, and most of you are familiar with it. So when it comes to investors like us, if we want to talk about satellites, for example, to convince a shareholder who has already taken a risk to launch a a telecommunications spacecraft 36,000 kilometers from Earth, and then you tell them, not only take that risk, I want you to put a non-space proven technology, because I think there is a good need, not in the country, but in Africa for it. It's not something we are very used to in this part of the world. So let's take that in more depth and practical usage. When we tried to launch or when we were building our satellite project, the idea was how can we build a satellite platform that can provide government communication system that can cover this region. And as you know, this region is probably not the most, say, the terrestrial telecommunication services in stress conditions are not the government use of communication. So, and usually there are satellites that are either private sector or government owned, whether European or US in this part of the world. So you can see the need for governments in this part of the world to have their own independent satellite communication systems. So we worked on it for a few years, and then the idea was, why do we need to send only government payloads? Why can't we have commercial services? And of course, your shareholders will be probably more inclined to put their money in the TV broadcasting, trunking kind of satellite services that are very known and well used in other areas. But what we saw in the US was very interesting at that time, especially used by a company called Wild Blue. Probably some of you are familiar with it, where they were able to use a multi-Ka band frequency pattern to reuse the frequency basically again, so you can achieve higher throughput in your satellite. So we looked at Middle East and Africa, and as you know, the fiber and mobile penetration, especially in Africa and some parts of Middle East, is not where it should be, and that's why satellite is a big market. So we've decided to take the cost of hardware from $2,000+ to $300, the monthly charges that usually only companies can afford, from $500 to $2,000 a month, to $30, and provide broadband services and make money out of it. And to do that, you need a new technology in that satellite to be able to provide such throughput and build such economy of scale, and also have a technology platform that with multi-gateways, in our case 4 gateways all over the region, so you can basically cater for such a demand. And probably you can see the faces of your investment committee telling them, I'm taking such a technology risk to provide such services in Africa and parts of Middle East. To be more specific, 26 countries. This technology has never been proven 100%, has been used somewhere else. Still a lot of work to be done. The vendor who you are working with never launched a satellite having such a technology. And this is where I want to relate what I said earlier, that the innovation that we try to foster here is under institutions. So these institutions, for example, Mubadala, I salute Mubadala not for, I am part of Mubadala, but for these companies to take technology risk in their projects is what we need. And probably this will continue for the next 5-10 years until we see SMEs, for example, we heard this morning about Khalifa Fund for SMEs and other programs. Until these guys come to the market and we see real innovation come in the private sector, I think big institutions, either government or semi-government owned, need to continue taking such a risk. Back to that satellite example, the decision was made to take the technology risk. Today, 80% of our first 3-year business is sold out, and we haven't launched our satellites yet. And we need to think about another spacecraft because the demand is unbelievable with the technology terms we were able to achieve. So this is an example how technology can be out of need, not only out of want to service this part of the world.
Okay, really interesting. One of the things I'm trying to do after each one of these things is to frame a couple ideas to seed the conversation afterwards. And there are 2 very important ideas in here. One which came up in the earlier discussion, which I think really warrants some deeper discussion, and that is the role of the state versus the role of the market. because it's changing. The world is changing. When I was in the Clinton administration, if somebody walked into a room and said, this, we ought to sponsor this, people would immediately say, oh, you're picking winners. That's bad news. They drive you out of the door. Industrial policy was a sin. It was a thing of the past. That's not the way the world is working right now. In China, in Singapore, in a whole host of countries around the world, the government is deeply involved. It's not going away. The government is going to be involved in these things. And that requires, some interest, some insight, because among other things, when the government gets involved, it subsidizes. And so now you've got a WTO suit in the United States against the Chinese, saying you've subsidized your green energy industry, and so that's an unfair trading practice. And so you've got a tension between a bigger role for government and a free trading system, which small states depend on in order to break out and make more than they can internally. So that's one. The other thing, which is an interesting idea, and sort of one of the big trends in innovation we may want to come back to in the context of this, has to do with taking expensive things and making them cheap, because the big new markets in the world are cheaper. I have a client in India which calls this Gandhian engineering, where in India what they did was they said, well, can we sell cell phone service? Well, we can if we get the price down to what it costs to send postage for an average Indian, a few cents a month. And so once they figured that price point, they were able to break out. So that's another trend. How do you do Gandhian engineering? Because that's where all the markets of tomorrow are. An expert in this kind of thinking is John Hagel. So let me turn to you for the next intervention.
I just wanted to say, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I first came to Abu Dhabi 35 years ago, and I've had the privilege of coming on a regular basis since then, and just seeing the progress that's been made over that time period gives me enormous confidence that you can take this to an entirely new level. So
well, you're saying all the growth in Abu Dhabi is associated with your visits.
Absolutely. Totally coincidental. I come from Silicon Valley. I've spent 25 years in Silicon Valley, so it's perhaps not surprising that I would highlight as a technology innovation as one of the next big things. But I also want to talk about another element which is related to it. In terms of the technology next big thing, we've all heard about cloud computing as something that is a major new form of organization of IT. I think that most of us still view cloud computing as just at the end of the day another lower cost form of IT outsourcing. You basically do exactly the same things, but you move them out into a cloud as opposed to doing them inside your premise. I actually believe that cloud computing will be a catalyst for an enormous disruption throughout the technology industry, having to do with defining a fundamentally different kind of architecture, a different way of organizing technology resources. If you think about the evolution of the IT industry, it's been from the inside out. We started with mainframe computers in centralized IT shops. We went to departmental computing. We went out to the desktop. And ultimately, we tried in very tentative ways to connect with other enterprises using IT. That's been the progression. It's been from the inside out. It's been very incremental. I would argue that with the advent of cloud computing, we have a chance to take a clean sheet approach to how we organize our IT resources and start from the outside in. Start with the proposition that the challenge and opportunity is to organize IT resources to support, as an example, 10,000 companies that are coordinating very complex activities among themselves on a global basis, where the transactions are not short-lived, but very long-lived interactions, which have a high propensity for failure, where you need very robust compensation mechanisms to make those interactions actually successful at the end of the day. Very different approach to IT architecture. It requires a fundamentally different mindset as to what is required in terms of supporting business activity. And related to that is a second next big thing, which is a different form of innovation. We automatically, and we do this on the panel here, when we talk about innovation, we've tended to focus on product and technology innovation. I actually believe the most profound innovation over the next decade is not going to be technology, it's going to be institutional innovation. How we organize relationships across large numbers of enterprises, and that's going to be an evolution where we start to support sustained extreme performance improvement by bringing together global networks of institutions to learn from each other more rapidly, and ultimately supported by these very different IT architectures. The combination of the institutional innovation and the IT architectures, I think, will truly be the next big thing. It's interesting that if you think back, I often ask groups, if you think back over the past 500 years, what is the single innovation that has created the most economic wealth? And most people will say, well, electricity, or the automobile, or the computer. It's none of those. It's the development of the limited liability corporation. That institutional form created more economic wealth than any individual technology innovation. And I believe we're going to see history repeat itself. Institutional innovation will be where the wealth creation occurs.
Interesting. What I'd like to do is I'd like to put an idea in your head so we can come back in the second round. And what I'd like to do, and I'm putting you on the spot here, is when you think cloud computing or you think institutional innovation, what kind of opportunities does that create for a place like UAE? Okay, but let me turn now to Sultan. You know, I think we have a sense of the great influence of the Aspen Institute in that they arranged for a major piece on Masdar to be on the front page of the New York Times last week prior to this conference, which has sort of underscored the fact that when you think about innovation in this part of the world, one of the first things you think about is Masdar. And that is so out of the box in so many areas. Perhaps you can pick one or two where you think the implications for other kinds of innovation are great.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David. But first, please allow me to take advantage of this opportunity to thank Walter and His Excellency, the Ambassador, for all their efforts in putting this very sophisticated platform together, and also for those of you who have participated in coordinating this event and making it happen. Now, if I remember correctly, your initial question was simply twofold. One was, what are the next wave, what are the areas that you believe the next wave of innovation will actually be undertaken and within our respective sectors? And then what are the challenges that are being faced by the innovators or the entrepreneurs in the sector? Now, please allow me to focus at what I know best, which is the energy sector. I believe the next wave of innovation in the energy sector is going to be very much around clean fossil fuel, and here I simply mention carbon capture and storage, and I can later on explain what we are doing about it in Abu Dhabi. Energy efficiency is another major area of focus. Resource efficiency, and here I mean water, sustainable architecture, and of course, the deployment or the acceleration of developing renewable energy technologies in a way that can be deployed in large scale to meet the global energy requirements. If we look at the world today, over 50% of the world's population live in cities. Cities today are responsible for not less than 80% of the emissions being produced in the whole world. Cities consume more than 60% of the energy required on a global level. Now that represents a huge opportunity, and that's where Masdar comes in. Before we start talking about accelerating the development in clean technologies or renewable energy technologies, first we need to focus, how can we become more energy efficient? How can we become more water efficient, water consumption efficient? We all know saving a kilowatt hour is always going to be cheaper and easier than producing a kilowatt hour. So that is our main focus going forward, being more energy efficient. We will soon see governments, public sectors, and even private sectors take serious, bold steps in putting together platforms, action plans, business plans, and also advancing technologies that will help not only meet the energy requirements covering the whole globe, but also in helping create the baseline of what is our energy consumption today. And against that, we can then develop what are the serious areas of concern moving forward as far as energy production is concerned. Now, these are the areas that I think the next wave of innovation is going to be very much focused on in the energy sector and its affiliates. But what are the challenges that comes with that? I can tell you that there are two clear challenges that we are facing. One, lack of regulatory framework and policy that supports such sector. Two, in the absence of robust ecosystems that include and incorporate the fundamentals required of acting as an incubator and as the catalyst for moving this sector forward, we simply are going to face difficulties. So today, based on what I heard earlier on in the first session, and of course I commend the discussion and the way it was conducted, but still, I am still puzzled with two main questions that were asked but were never answered. One, how do you ensure that you cater the right sustainable human development platforms that will meet all of these innovation and technology advancements that are taking place within Abu Dhabi, let alone the world? Two, what is the policy that is required that will help cater for making this happen? Three, how sustainable is the funding that is available today? How sustainable is that funding going to be? What we're talking about here is not a 5-year financial forecast. We're talking about a minimum of 20 to 30 years. Do we understand what is actually required to make this happen? What's really interesting here is that I very much support us establishing visions and communicating visions. But what are the action plans that will make those visions turn into reality? I very much support and commend, as I personally participated in establishing the Abu Dhabi Economic Vision and many other visions. But do we have the right platforms and the right mechanisms in place today that will transform those visions into reality? Mubadala can only do so much. Mubadala, since inception, have transformed the economy in a big way. Mubadala, I look at it today as the diversification engine of Abu Dhabi, and there are a number of successes that demonstrates their capability of making it happen. But can Mubadala do it alone? We need here to address a bigger question. Public-private sector partnership, public-private partnerships. Government is supposed to do so much, but the private sector, he needs to also step up. But in order for the private sector to step up, you need to supply them with commitment, long-term visibility through regulatory frameworks and through policy. Thank you.
Very, very interesting, and it raises a lot of questions, and I very much hope that all of you will join in a moment or two to follow up on some of those questions. One of the things that strikes me in listening to it is, again, that we should try to look for that action agenda over the course of this discussion, to identify places where new partnerships can answer some of these questions. Because just as individuals network out, countries don't need to operate or handle these things alone. One of the things that even struck me as I was listening to your comment about cities, most of the focus on cities is on Asia. China's got 78 cities of 1 million people. It's going to have 221 cities of 1 million people in 20 years. India has 36 cities. It's going to have 70-odd cities of 1 million people. That's where all the innovation is growing. But you make the point, and I think absolutely correctly, that the existing cities have massive changes that have got to come to them. So you've got one set of opportunities called new cities and another set called Cities 2.0. And you know, the United States of America in its Rust Belt has a big problem. It's got broken down cities. And organizations like Masdar are developing the capacity and the capability and the understanding that can be harnessed by those cities in different kinds of partnerships. So it's not all about those new cities in China you've never heard of. It may be about Detroit. So that's the kind of partnership innovation maybe we can look at and we can talk to. But before we do, and I'm just giving you this as a heads up, I'm going to go back to John because I teed him up for a question. And then I'm going to go out to you and try and draw in a conversation with everybody. But John, I teed you up, and this is your opportunity for another breakthrough here in UAE.
The question was, what is the opportunity for the UAE in terms of technology disruption and this institutional innovation that I was talking about? I think specifically I would say that in terms of the technology disruption that I outlined in terms of a new form of architecture, what's interesting in terms of a challenge is that the major technology players today on a global scale fall into two camps, and I'm going to oversimplify for the sake of discussion. On the one side, you've got the very large enterprise technology companies, and they call themselves enterprise technology companies for a reason. It's because they are totally focused on the enterprise, within the four walls of the enterprise. They have a very difficult time connecting out to third parties unless the enterprise can dictate the technology that everybody else will use. On the other side, you have what I would call the web tech companies, who largely are focused on very short-term transactions, supporting scalable platforms for short-term transactions. Neither of those groups of technology companies have the mindset or the capability or the orientation to develop this kind of disruptive architecture. So I think there is an opportunity for somebody to come in from the edge, a new game player, and redefine the architectures, using some of the lead companies that are pioneering this institutional innovation in terms of global networks. I'll just give one example of a company that could be an interesting lead customer for defining these architectures. They're very hungry for this, by the way. It's a company in China called Li & Fung. It's in the apparel industry. It operates today a global network of 10,000 business partners in coordinating very complex activity related to supply networks for apparel designers. They use almost no technology to support that network today because they do not see the architecture in place that will give them the flexibility and scalability to support the kind of network they have. That's a huge opportunity. I think in terms of the institutional innovation side, I personally view a country like Abu Dhabi as the interesting testbed or driver of some of this institutional innovation. I think the challenge for larger countries who have large populations is they stay wedded to a traditional institutional architecture which has to do with building scalable companies that are focused on efficiency. That's the old model. I think the new model, which is a smaller country, which understands the need to connect out to talent on a global scale, can pioneer the kinds of institutional architectures required to create those kinds of scalable global networks so that everybody is learning faster by working together. So I think on both the technology front and the institutional front, a country like Abu Dhabi has a very interesting opportunity to be a global disruptor.
It's very interesting. Li & Fung is a company that you can go to if you want a supply chain in China. And they'll put together the supply chain. And there is an opportunity for the Abu Dhabi or the UAE to perform that kind of skeleton key role for an entire region, for the Middle East or for the Middle East and Africa. And so, you know, as the entrepot, in much the same way that Singaporean companies do the same thing. So again, within each of these challenges, there lies an opportunity. And what I'm hoping here now is that as you pose questions, and as we have this discussion, we focus on what is the opportunity that lies within the challenge we're discussing, so that we do come towards something that's more practical as an action plan. But please present your comments in a form that we can respond to. Yes?
I think what John is pointing out is a really important thing, and I would say, I'm hoping we'll talk about it tomorrow, that the sector that is important to UAE, that is crying out for using the cloud computing and institutional reconfiguration as innovation, is health. That actually, and I don't see any health system doing it yet, and the reason is there's something about this new architecture that allows a self-learning system that is, I think we'll talk about, I hope we're going to talk about tomorrow in health, but I think that's going to be a very critical, new, and needed example. And so it was more a comment. If I could just, this is one other thing that's
Can I just ask a question of two of the people following off that comment, and then come back to you. But Sultan or KR, it seems to me that another application for cloud computing is energy efficiency. And that using that kind of technology is going to be critical if what we're going to do is really bring down and monitor consumption, with, smart grids, but also sort of smart usage. Do you agree with that?
I do. When you go from the traditional 24/7 power plants to renewables like solar and wind that are intermittent, the key issue is one of storage. And you can address storage from two different ways. You can say there's going to be a new battery technology, there's going to be a new capacitor technology, and like cars can do it. The other thing is to say that your entire system of consumption, buildings, factories, everything, is literally a big flywheel. And there's opportunity there to be able to use this when you have and not use it when you don't. But who needs it and when do they need it? Because electricity is the ultimate perishable. You don't use it, when you have it, you don't get to use it. So being able to use cloud computing to build about that infrastructure will be extremely important. If I may, I'll take this opportunity to say, again, we're talking about sustainability. And at the core of it, I agree with the Sultan that efficiency in everything that we do is key to sustainability. Without efficiency, there is no sustainability. When you think that way, think about it not just from energy, think about it from capital efficiency. So we're talking about the US and UAE. I was just sitting and listening to you say what you said about Masdar, and I'm sitting on the other side, which is the exact opposite. I have a very substantially large investment in a company, all coming from the private sector, zero from the public sector. In energy technologies, traditionally we have talked about startup as having a valley of death. That is, you have invented something, you need to commercialize it, it takes money, and that's the valley of death. In clean tech, really, there are two valleys of death because of the size and scale that you have to deal with. One is taking that simple idea and making it into a workable product. The second one is now building the factories and the supply chain and everything that you need to take it to scale where the cost will come down. That's the second valley of death. The first valley of death is what venture capital and private equity knows how to do. The second valley of death, private equity and private capital will come in as long as there's an off-taker that is a government-funded institution willing to take that product. Otherwise, it's too huge a bet. So I see there as an opportunity of capital efficiency between the private markets and the public markets. That's one. The city versus how to design the city. I would love to design a good city, but I would take it one step further and fundamentally ask, can we reduce building the number of cities, and is that good for the planet? And fundamentally, from human history, if you go and look at why people go to cities, it's for access. If they had access, they wouldn't want to leave where they are and go into cities. With the distributed technologies that we have that you wanted me to address, one of the enabling things that can happen from a cultural perspective is one doesn't have to leave their little town to get the city-like privileges. So it's sort of the best of both worlds.
Sultan, do you want to add anything to that?
What I want to say simply is such technologies, ICT, is in fact an integral part of energy efficiency and resource efficiency. But what I also would like to add is, I go back to the previous, something against you, Vijay. I like you, I go back to the previous panel. The answer that was posed in regards to VC and establishment of the VC culture. And is the VC culture today, is it a plus and a catalyst for advancing energy efficiency and renewable energy? Or is it in fact the reason for not advancing such technology? That is one. Two, VC venture capitalists, do they understand the S technology curve and what it actually takes to get a technology from the laboratory to a large-scale deployment? You can make all this excitement with 1,000 of venture capitalists trying to inject small few $1 million in these very small companies, but once they start seeing profit, they dump them. This is a very serious concern to the industry, and an answer needs to be provided here. The long-term commitment to helping advance these technologies through VCs and private equity funds, there is a gap, and that gap needs to be bridged. So who takes the responsibility of bridging that gap? Is it the VC culture? Is it the VC community? Or is it the private equity community? Or is it the sovereign funds? That is a serious question that needs to be addressed. And then when it comes to Abu Dhabi, if we draw our experiences, or what we've collected from the experiences that have actually taken place around the world, how are we applying that in a way that is custom tailored to better fit the Abu Dhabi innovation strategy moving forward? That is, again, a question that I was very much hoping to hear the answer for this morning.
All right, someone must offer the answer. Okay, Vijay, you may answer. You may defend your panel, which is clearly inferior to our panel.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to defend the honor and integrity of the opening question. And we are here to ask questions. We leave it to the wiser ones that follow to answer them. We're big picture people. Exactly. But more seriously, I think Sultan, the question or challenge you put down is absolutely the right one. But it also gets to the nature of the industries we're talking about. Much of the enthusiasm about if I can call it the Silicon Valley model of garage entrepreneurship, where VCs came to the fore, dealt with industries like software and related industries where you can actually have two guys in a garage, not only come up with invention, but connect it with value creation. Low barriers to entry, these are things that are quite different, and short turnaround cycles to come up with a new app for Facebook or something. With energy, the industry you're most concerned with, but also with healthcare, pharma, biotech. These are long-lived industries, ones that take long, patient capital, and where the connection between the discovery process and the proving, often regulatory process, ultimately connection with value creation, goes through a much more windy and riskier road. So I think the point to identify that the forms that worked in one industry may not be suitable, or at least may be inadequate, I absolutely agree with. In fact, this is something I was discussing with Bill Gates a few weeks ago, where he made the point, much along the lines of the panel thus far, that in energy, where he's very interested these days, there is a role to get past the second valley of death, to use KR's language. And he said government has to play a role here. Now, what form that plays, I think, is actually the interesting question. Because history shows there are unhelpful roles that governments have played, particularly when they become enthusiastic about specific technologies. And I think in this room, people are sufficiently sophisticated that that particular mistake may not be made, but then what do you do instead? And I think that's really what people are grasping for. I think there's an acknowledgement there's an important role for government. Some of it is in, again, framework conditions. It may be to do with externalities taxation or setting a value on efficiency and demand reduction rather than simply supply-side solutions. That's a framework or even conceptual solution that government can play a role, culture, expectations. But then when you get to, if we set up a fund, as has been discussed today, or an initiative like Masdar, what does the money actually flow to? You have to make some choices, which technologies, which companies, and that's often the devil's in the details. So I come back to you for the answers from the wise men of this panel by offering just that observation that there are other industries like biotech and pharma that also have a mismatch where VC isn't the only answer.
Yeah, there is, by the way. There's also an expectations problem. Some countries have the money, some countries don't have the money. The United States spent $80 billion or committed $80 billion last year to green energy. It will never do that again. That is never going to happen again. And so it just doesn't have the money. And so it may be able to play around with regulatory environments or setting framework, but other people will have the money. And this is an industry where it costs to get to scale. And so there may be advantages there, yes.
Thank you. I think one of the most effective roles a government can actually play in promoting innovation, and if you look at historical examples, it's actually offering prizes in an open competition. And this is something that has actually been lost over the last couple of decades. The most famous example was obviously in the 1700s when the British government offered a prize for somebody who could figure out what was known as the longitude prize. And prizes, unfortunately, over the last few decades have replaced grants. And there's a very interesting study done by Robert Hanson from George Mason University in which he examines the role of grants versus prizes in terms of actually promoting innovation. Prizes obviously have a number of advantages. First of all, they pay nothing except for an actual result to an intractable problem, like a longitude problem. And secondly, everybody with an idea has a chance, has a crack at the problem, and not just the usual government experts. In the longitude problem, most of the astronomers at the time were horrified that a clockmaker actually won the prize. And if you look at the alternative energy debate, governments all over the world are offering grants of millions of dollars upon millions of dollars, whereas if many of them, I'm certain, offered just a prize of a few $1 billion, it will be a lot easier for institutions to actually approach venture capitalists and say, look, we think we've cracked this problem, and if you invest this X million now, and with immediacy, your capital can be realised with this multi-billion-dollar prize, rather than actually having to wait for that technology to go to market. So I think this is something that we seem to have lost historically, simply because the bureaucracy of government allows grants to be allocated a lot easier than actually managing much of the prize, the mechanism of managing the prize.
Ibrahim, you may want to address the prize issue. Are there alternative approaches to financing that you think can prime the pumps for innovation in ways that are not being sufficiently utilized?
What I'd like to do is, I'd like to tie the concept that John spoke about around cloud, and then address some of Sultan's comments, and then maybe we can get to the prize versus grants. In our industry,
I feel, by the way, right at home because I'm from Washington, and the way panels like this work in Washington is somebody asks a question, and then the person provides whatever answer they want.
So in our industry, cloud is very important, right? Cloud will be big. Cloud needs to be powered by millions and billions of servers. These will take lots of semiconductors and lots of energy-efficient semiconductors. The other part of this is mobility. To access the cloud, you need today a couple 100 million mobile devices, one day 10 billion mobile devices. So what we did, because I think we need to tie back to Abu Dhabi and the role of Abu Dhabi in innovation. What we did is we have an industry problem today, and we also have a problem in Abu Dhabi, where we don't spend enough on research and development. We looked at all the universities, and we discovered the number of patents, because in our part of the world, we use the number of patents as a proxy for innovation. We can debate that, John, if you like. We said there are no patents in our part of the world. So we'd like to catalyze and foster research and development in the universities. And what we did is, we went around the world and we studied all the models around the world, and we came to the conclusion that the way to do it is by creating these centers of research in the universities, but more importantly, is creating an innovation institution that will serve as a center of gravity for this research, and the topics that these institutions and university research centers will address are topics that are very important for the industry, such as cloud and such as mobility. When you do that, what happens? You attract great faculty, as Dr. Sexton spoke. When you attract great faculty and researchers, you then attract great students. So in essence, through our industrial strategy, we are now facilitating the attraction of faculty and students and thinkers and talents by creating a research and development ecosystem in Abu Dhabi. To succeed, we need sustained commitment from the government for research and development. Sultan asked the right question: do we have a sustained commitment for research and development, or is this an $80 billion a year commitment and then the next year it's gone? And number two, do we have the right policies? Because I disagree. I think you made the comment earlier that do you pick the winners or do you let an entrepreneurial culture decide who wins and who loses? Well, I'm not sure we have the choice here. And in our industry, I'm not sure we have the choice. We have to pick the winner. We have to invest in the winner. We have to commit to the winner. But at the same time, that's not enough. We need to make sure that we create the right policies and ecosystem to generate that entrepreneurial energy and generate that entrepreneurial activity that's required to succeed. But from the base we're starting, we need sustained government commitments, and we need to pick the winners. And we need the right policies to create the right entrepreneurial environment, and creating a fund is not the only policy tool to create the right entrepreneurial environment, as we know. So before we get into prizes versus grants, I think we have some issues to address structurally and industrial strategy to make sure we have the right environment. And then we start using these tools such as grants and prizes and incentives to catalyze and sustain that energy. Again, I go back to the topic: for us to succeed in the semiconductor industry, all these elements have to fall in place. And all of them have to work, and they have to work for 20 years. That's why the Taiwanese succeeded. That's why the Koreans succeeded. That's why the Americans have succeeded in this brutally competitive, capital-intensive industry. If we don't do all these, we will not succeed.
Right, but it's important to sort out the mythology in all of these things. Because the United States sells the mythology that it was all done in a garage and it was all done by the market and the government played no role, which is true, except if you consider information technology, energy, healthcare, and all the other things where the government played a huge role. I see 3 questions. We have a limited amount of time, so let's just try to go fairly quickly. Yes, sir.
John Habib, I'm a local lawyer and volunteer president of AmCham Abu Dhabi, American Business Group. As a local lawyer, my ears almost fell off my head when I heard that the LLC is one of the primary drivers of innovation, I guess, in the United States, clearly. And I think that was developed in the small state of Wyoming, first of all.
Well, but I think you're talking about the Limited Liability Corporation back in the 19th century. But that's
the Limited Liability Company here is one of the policy decisions that our leaders at the table have to make in the coming months. A lot of people from overseas, they don't know that the Limited Liability Company here has a different structure that many argue inhibits innovation and investment. And for instance, Dr. Sultan, I think, had the visionary step to create an exception to the limited liability within the Masdar free zone, which allows innovation with 100% foreign ownership as long as you don't do business in the country. My question is, when you're talking about governmental policies on the funding side, are you getting ahead of yourself until you get the legal and regulatory regime put in place to allow capital, which, as we all know, capital is coward. We want to allow capital to come in here with full confidence that they can operate freely in thriving joint ventures, not alone for that.
All right, let me turn to Jassem because he hasn't had his second round of speaking here. And let me add one specific to the question, which is the ability to declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, to shut down a company. It's harder to shut down a company here than in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think I agree with you that regulatory framework is a very important part of the infrastructure. And we talk about innovation and innovation enablers here, but I think the basic infrastructure still need to be worked on, and I think the government and other sectors do identify that. So, for example, we are talking about cloud computing. We all know that there is no internet exchange in the country. So you are not allowed to terminate traffic in the country and and redirect it outside without terminating your traffic into one of the telecom operators here, who have the right also or have monopoly over establishing any international data traffic business. So that's also part of the regulatory framework that we need to work on. And we think that will be taken care of probably within the next 12 to 16 months. When it comes to ownership, bankruptcy, I personally believe Chapter 11 is probably one of the great enablers for innovation and entrepreneurs in the U.S. because you know that you might lose it all, but at least you'll be able to start again. It's not in the U.S., it's not in Europe as much as the U.S., and we know that Chapter 11 was established to protect the railroads company where it was almost going out of business. So the company saw an asset that basically goes south. In order to protect that asset that was very strategic at that time, they allowed bankruptcy. And that's how it started, and then it went down to even SMEs. So we don't have that in the country, and I'm not the right guy to address such policies. But I agree with you. The regulatory framework needs to be improved, and we have been hearing, and I think the government has communicated a very strong message that they are looking into it, and we will see changes down the road. And I think the regulatory framework is part of the infrastructure.
All right. In my commitment to constantly prove the superiority of this panel, the preceding panel ended 15 minutes late. We are only going to end 10 minutes late. That gives us 6 minutes. So just keep in mind we have 6 minutes to go. Yes?
Samir Shema from Intel Corporation. I'll keep it really short, but I have a tactical suggestion and a strategic challenge for the folks up there. The tactical suggestion is on John's comment about the cloud. I think specifically here in the region, we do have an opportunity to build on the innovations coming out in the cloud. When you look at the cloud, it's ultimately building on huge data centers, and these days data centers are being built near the power source. So we have an opportunity here to really be a physical part of the cloud. We have all the infrastructure to support that. And I would say that's probably an opportunity that requires also a lot of capital, which a lot of other institutions don't have. So that's something, food for thought. By the way, John, you missed a couple of small companies, Intel and ATIC, but that's a side point. And then the challenge that I have for you folks is more long-term is when you're talking about innovation, you really have to talk about overhauling the educational system. And today, here in the region, our kids are still being taught the way we were taught 30 years ago. Memorize everything and walk out of school. That's not an environment that encourages innovation. We really have to start looking at the kids from the get-go. So that's something that's for you guys to look at.
Does anybody else have a question here? Because I'd like to give everybody a very brief chance to wrap up their comments. So if there's another question. Anybody else? Yes.
Robert Wexler, just quickly, I too was fascinated by John's assertion with respect to the limited liability corporation, and I took it to mean that it was the limited liability corporation that created the space in which innovation and bold new ideas could take place. So the question is, what is that new infrastructure that's going to be created in this region that will allow that kind of dynamic to occur here? And it seems to me not to introduce geopolitics, but no region on Earth is as affected as this region by whether or not the geopolitical questions will be resolved successfully or unsuccessfully. So it seems to me the question is, what role can innovation and bold, big ideas play in the resolution of those geopolitical ideas so that the new LLC for the 21st century in this region would actually be a dynamic of peace?
All right, who would like to start by solving the problems of the Middle East? Before lunch. In 5 minutes or less.
And take the other part.
Yeah, well, you may each take the other part. I'm going to start with Ibrahim. I want to work our way down the panel. I just want to give you each 30 seconds to wrap up if there's something that you want to say. And if there's not, you may just...
Yeah, I'll skip the geopolitical question and focus on, first of all, I think Intel should build its next cloud data center in Abu Dhabi, so make sure you redrive that comment. But I think, I want to conclude by, we have a lot of challenges with policy, we need to get there. We have tremendous challenges with geopolitical issues. We have a tremendous set of challenges with attracting the right faculty, attracting the right thinkers, the right students, the right people. Right? So we can't wait and just hope that all these challenges will go away. And that's what we're trying to do with one of these pillars and enablers, which is the semiconductor ecosystem. Now, on learning, there's a lot of efforts with the Abu Dhabi Educational Council on reforming kindergarten to 12 and higher education. We can talk about that forever. One of the things that we're doing is tapping into this global platform that we have because of our relationships, because of now our network of assets, to build and invest our local talent here. So we have 7 semiconductor manufacturing facilities around the world. One thing we're doing today is we go to all the engineering schools here in the UAE and we attract the best and the brightest and we send them to our facilities around the world for training. Now some of you might say, well, that doesn't do much. Well, it does a couple things in our opinion. First of all, it integrates the local talent into the global marketplace. The initial reaction from some of our students was, does that mean I have to work in a fab, especially the females? Does that mean I have to work in a fab with males? Well, yes, of course you do. That's what a clean room environment is. We can't separate male and female in a fab. We initially faced that challenge. We no longer face that challenge. Second thing is, well, I'd like to work in Abu Dhabi. I don't want to work in Singapore or Germany or New York. Well, that doesn't work because our fab in Abu Dhabi is not planned to be set up until 2015. So in order for you to succeed in this industry, you have to go learn and operate how to live in Singapore, in Germany, in New York. And the third thing is the mindset and the ability to operate in a very brutally competitive environment and understand that when you go to work in the morning, you don't have all the answers and you have to continuously work in a team environment, develop the relationships, come up with creative ideas to solve the problems that you will face on a day-to-day basis inside these manufacturing facilities. That's what makes this industry so unique. So through this industrial policy, we have now given an opportunity for the young talent, the young engineering talent in this country, which, by the way, I know comments earlier this morning were around, well, the UAE talent here doesn't recognize what it means to work hard, etc. That's fine, but we are seeing incredible talent, young talent in this country, and when you give them that access, when you give them that opportunity, they understand how to operate in this global environment and what it means to operate in this industry. And that is the beauty of what the leadership of Abu Dhabi has committed to and is building.
I don't want to take anything away from that very thoughtful response, but my sense of pride in this panel is over. We will not finish more quickly than the others, but we'll try to limit this to 5 minutes. And the only encouragement I can give you is that you 4 gentlemen stand between these people and their lunch. So, John.
I would just end with an appeal in terms of as Abu Dhabi builds larger institutions. I think the key question in terms of institutional innovation is why do we have institutions to begin with? And in the past, for the past couple of centuries, the answer has been because we need scalable efficiency. That is the reason we have companies, that's the reason we have large educational institutions, that's the reason we have government. I think the opportunity is to rethink the rationale at a fundamental level and say that it is no longer about scalable efficiency. It is about the opportunity to develop talent more rapidly and to think about the institutional arrangements that are required to develop talent more rapidly. That will be the winning formula for institutional innovation. Wish Abu Dhabi well. Thank you.
So I would take this opportunity, if I were UAE, to have a clean sheet and think differently from the rest of the world in terms of clean energy. Is it clean energy or green energy? Given that overnight our fossil fuel infrastructure is not going to become renewable, zero carbon, the opportunity for reduced carbon clean energy is phenomenal. And that has to be a major thrust for this country, in addition to everything else that you're doing. That's number one. The second thing is, in order to figure out the next way to forge it, I've heard the silos of IT and cloud, health, energy, and a few other things. And I would say take a system approach to it. Look at your core competencies. What you have going for you is your sovereign wealth. What you have going for you is your geography of sitting between the East and the West in terms of the back office and the front office. And you have a lot of energy that's cheap. You put that together, what do you want to sell? Do you want to sell your energy to somebody else, or do you want to value add that and build a data center and sell the data to somebody else? You can now combine a lot of these things and put something together. Those are the two things that come to mind as a wrap-up.
Okay. Sultan.
Thank you, David. Education and human capital development, I mean here sustainable human capital development, are two activities that cut across all of our different initiatives within Abu Dhabi. In fact, they are an integral part of the Abu Dhabi Economic Transformation Plan. We know what our competitive advantages are, and believe me, we are capitalizing on them. So going forward, as far as the energy portfolio is concerned, we are very much capitalizing on our deep energy expertise, which have resulted in us being leaders on a global level in the energy sector, and also on the substantial financial resources that we have access to through our involvement in the hydrocarbon sector to position Abu Dhabi and the UAE as a true energy player rather than an oil and gas exporter, and to also maintain our position in the global energy market. The other thing that I also wanted to make sure that we all understand here, the fact that Abu Dhabi was able to attract reputable institutions like the New York University and have it establish its campus here in Abu Dhabi is an achievement on its own, and that clearly demonstrates Abu Dhabi's commitment to education and to human capital development, and which also demonstrates that New York University, and unfortunately we did not hear today from the President the number of faculty that they have been able to attract only in the past few months, and the type of students that they have been able to attract from all over the world, and how competent and how special these students and faculty are. This, to us, is something that we have to be very proud of. On the other side, in the education equation, the fact that we have been able to attract an institution like MIT to help establish a homegrown graduate level university in Abu Dhabi that is very much dedicated to renewable energy and sustainability and very much research driven is another achievement that we have to be very proud of. So the ecosystem around innovation and technology development and diversification, the diversification of the Abu Dhabi economy is actually happening. And what I can comfortably tell you is that Abu Dhabi is on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you. Jassem.
Yeah, I think for us to continue innovation, there are four probably main points that we need to keep working on. And the first one is basically what my colleagues here have highlighted, which is the human capital, mainly national human capital, but also expatriate human capital that we have been and will continue attracting. Second thing is infrastructure, and we believe infrastructure is so fundamental to innovation in this part of the world and anywhere else, and that includes education, ICT as a big enabler, regulations, data centers we talked about, any kind of technology that used to be a sector probably 1 decade ago, today is becoming only an enabler. Infrastructure is something we are very serious about here. Critical mass is something we struggle with here in the UAE because of the economy size, but critical mass require, and we have been achieving it through good coordination between public and private sector, and that has been, I believe, a big success. And of course, the fourth thing that also was mentioned this morning is a global reach. For us, there is no room to grow our economy and the innovation side of it if we still compete and consider ourselves a regional player. We have to take this to a global level, and this is what we have been doing for the last probably 1 decade, and we have seen the difference.
Thank you very much. I'm in the midst of finishing up a book that's going to come out next year, which looks at the history of the relationship between the public sector and the private sector for the past 1,000 years. And at the conclusion of the book, I focus more on now than 800 years ago, so you could still go out and get it. But at the conclusion of the book, one of the things that I think about in the context of sort of what is postmodern power is that the roles of companies and countries are changing very profoundly. If you're having a lot of companies that have to behave very much like countries these days in terms of their social responsibilities, but you've also got a lot of countries that are learning to behave more like companies in order to be competitive. And there are a couple of examples in my book, but one of them is Abu Dhabi, because it is behaving in very ways like a smart company. And the critical element of any smart company, as all of you know, and has been referred to here, is the people. And on this panel and on the preceding panel and in the course of this discussion, it's clear that you have world-class thinkers and leaders right here who are shaping this evolution of this company-like country in a very, very interesting direction. I know we're going to continue to discuss that throughout today and throughout tomorrow. But I believe, Tony and Walter, that the next step is to go through these doors and to go have lunch. Is that correct? Correct. All right, let's do that. Please join me in thanking Mr.